"Fix my Ferrari and I'll marry you," the CEO joked, and the whole charity tent laughed like Marcus Vale was part of the entertainment. He didn't laugh. He lifted the hood, leaned over the engine, and went so still that even the photographer lowered his camera. What did he see under that polished red hood? Why did one tiny mark near the wiring make a grown mechanic forget the crowd around him? And why did the same joke that made everyone smile leave his teenage nephew staring at him like he had just failed some private test? Before this night was over, a Ferrari worth more than most homes would expose more than a mechanical problem. So tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. If you enjoy emotional stories about quiet people finally being seen, subscribe and stay with this one. The smell of hot rubber mixed with desert dust always reached the parking lot before the engines did. Marcus Vale noticed it the moment he stepped out of his faded silver pickup outside the Palm Springs Charity Motors Gala. It was early evening, but the California heat still floated above the asphalt like an invisible curtain. Someone nearby laughed, somewhere else. An expensive engine barked to life before settling into a polished idle. Marcus adjusted the worn canvas tool bag hanging from his shoulder. The zipper had been replaced years ago with a plain leather lace because the original pull had broken. It worked well enough. He never bothered replacing it. His nephew, Jalen, hurried to catch up, carrying a small cooler filled with bottled water. "You know these people could afford gold-plated water bottles," Jalen muttered. Marcus smiled without looking at him. "They still get thirsty." Jalen rolled his eyes, though a grin escaped anyway. The gala spread across the luxury resort like another world. Rows of Ferraris, Lamborghinis, vintage Porsches, and rare McLarens reflected the orange evening sky. Guests wandered between them, holding glasses of sparkling wine while a jazz quartet played beneath white canvas tents. Marcus never felt angry in places like this. He simply felt out of place. That feeling had stopped surprising him years ago. Near the registration booth, a volunteer handed him a visitor badge with his name misspelled. "Sorry about that. It's fine." He tucked the badge into his shirt pocket instead of pinning it on. Not far away, a vending machine buzzed loudly beside the service entrance. Someone slapped its side after it swallowed another dollar bill. Nobody seemed surprised. Apparently it had been doing that all afternoon. Marcus almost smiled. Some machines lied. Some people did too. The difference wasn't always obvious, until something broke. His phone vibrated. One message: Clara Miz. "Cross would appreciate 5 minutes of your opinion before tonight's auction begins." Marcus stared at the screen, longer than necessary. 5 minutes. That was how these things usually started. 5 harmless minutes became signatures. Signatures became responsibility. Responsibility sometimes stayed with a person long after everyone else had forgotten their names. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Ready?" Jalen asked. Marcus nodded. "I'll look. That's all. That's all." As they crossed toward the private display area, Marcus noticed the bright red Ferrari already surrounded by cameras. Its polished paint reflected the crowd almost perfectly. Almost. His eyes paused on a faint line near the rear quarter panel. Not damage, just something that didn't belong. Too small for anyone else to notice. Too familiar for him to ignore. Across the platform, Vivian Cross laughed at something one of the board members had just said. The crowd laughed with her. She hadn't seen Marcus yet, but within minutes, one careless joke would stop every conversation inside the pavilion and force both of them to confront a memory neither of them had expected to find hiding beneath a Ferrari's hood. 3 years before, that Ferrari sat under the gala lights. Marcus Vale sat at a small kitchen table, behind his shop, with a cold plate of scrambled eggs in front of him. The apartment was narrow, built above 2 storage bays and 1 office that smelled faintly of brake cleaner, no matter how many windows he opened. The refrigerator hummed too loud. The sink dripped once every few minutes. On the wall beside the stove, a cheap clock ran 7 minutes slow because Marcus had stopped caring enough to fix it. Jalen was 12 then, all elbows and sharp questions. He sat across from Marcus in an oversized Raiders hoodie, pushing 1 corner of toast around his plate. "Did my dad know?" he asked. Marcus did not lift his head right away. Outside, a delivery truck backed into the alley, its warning beep cutting through the room in short, flat bursts. "Know what?" Jalen looked at him like that answer had cost both of them something. "You know what?" Marcus set his fork down. His hands were clean, but the lines around his nails still held old grease. That was the thing about certain work. Soap could take off the surface. It couldn't reach everything. "Your father was a good man," Marcus said. "I didn't ask that." "No." "Then answer." Marcus reached into the pocket of his work shirt and touched the melted pit pass tag he carried more often than he admitted. The plastic had warped in the heat of the accident. One edge had curled inward. The printed name, Andre Vale, remained partly visible beneath a smear of black. He never showed it to Jalen. Not then. The boy had already lost enough. Marcus took a breath through his nose and let it leave slowly. "There are reports," he said. "There are people who wrote them. That doesn't mean every line tells the whole thing." Jalen's mouth tightened. "So you won't tell me? I'm telling you what I can." "No. You're telling me what keeps you comfortable." That landed harder than Marcus expected. He looked toward the tiny window over the sink. A lizard rested outside on the sill, perfectly still in the morning heat, its little throat pulsing. It had been there most mornings that summer. Jalen had named it Captain because it always stood like it owned the building. Marcus should have smiled at that. He didn't. Across the table, Jalen shoved his chair back. "My dad died. Uncle Marcus. Everybody whispers stuff, and you just act like if you don't say it, it didn't happen." Marcus wanted to tell him everything. He wanted to say, Andre had made one rushed decision at the end of a long night. He wanted to say the team had pushed too hard. He wanted to say blame was a heavy wrench, and once a boy picked it up, it could bend his whole life. Instead, Marcus folded the pit pass tag deeper into his palm until the warped edge pressed into his skin. "Finish your breakfast," he said. Jalen stared at him. Then he walked away. The eggs stayed on the plate until noon. Marcus washed them down the sink without eating a bite. By the time Marcus Vale turned 42, he had built a life around refusing invitations. He refused dealership contracts that came with glossy brochures and quiet pressure. He refused racing teams that wanted his hands but not his judgment. He refused emergency favors from people who only remembered his number after another mechanic had already said no. His shop sat off a service road behind a tire warehouse, far enough from Palm Canyon Drive that tourists never wandered in by accident. The sign outside read, "Vale Diagnostics" in faded blue letters. One corner buzzed when the desert wind hit it wrong. Inside, everything had a place. The torque wrench with blue tape on the handle stayed in the second drawer. The carbon fiber inspection mirror hung above the main bench. Red grease pencils sat in an old coffee mug beside a stack of work orders. White cotton gloves were folded in a shallow tray near the scan tools, clean enough to look unused. Marcus knew people mistook order for peace. It wasn't. Order was what he could control. On the afternoon before the gala, Jalen came in after school and found him under a gray Aston Martin, checking a sensor connection. You got another fancy call, Jalen said. Marcus slid out from beneath the car. Who? Some assistant, Clara. She talks like her emails wear perfume. Marcus wiped his hands with a rag. Jalen held up the shop phone. Ms. Vivian Cross requests a private evaluation of a collector Ferrari prior to a charitable auction. That's a lot of words for, come look at my car. She said they'll pay triple. Marcus tossed the rag into a bin. No. Jalen's eyebrows rose. You didn't even ask how much triple is. I know what triple costs. The boy leaned against the tool chest. The top drawer did not shut all the way because a socket rail had bent 2 winters earlier. Marcus kept meaning to fix it. He never did. You mean paperwork? I mean people. Jalen's face changed just a little. That was the cost Marcus hated most. His nephew had learned to hear the door closing before Marcus touched the knob. You always say no before anybody can ask you something real, Jalen said. Marcus looked at the Aston Martin instead of at him. Some asks come wrapped. Yeah, and some answers come from being scared. Marcus's jaw worked once. He could have told Jalen not to speak to him that way. He could have reminded him who paid the rent, who made sure the boy got to school, who sat through parent meetings when teachers used words like withdrawn and defiant. He said none of that. A white SUV pulled up outside. Clara stepped out first, holding a tablet against her chest. Behind her came Vivian Cross in a cream suit, not dressed for a garage, but not afraid of one either. She paused at the open bay door and looked around before saying a word. Marcus noticed that. Most people looked at the cars first. She looked at the exits. Mr. Vale? Clara asked. Marcus reached for the towel hanging near the bench. That's me. Vivian stepped forward. I need 5 minutes of your honesty. Marcus glanced at Jalen. The boy stared back, waiting to see which version of his uncle would answer. Marcus folded the towel once, set it down, and said, 5 minutes. By the time Marcus reached the Ferrari display at the gala, Vivian Cross was already surrounded. A county judge stood on one side of her. 2 donors in linen jackets stood on the other. A photographer crouched near the front wheel, waiting for the moment when she would place one manicured hand on the hood and smile like the whole night had been built by good taste and clean money. Vivian saw Marcus and gave him a professional smile. Mr. Vale, thank you for coming. Marcus nodded once. Ma'am. Brent Lask, the lead technician hired for the event, looked Marcus over from his scuffed boots to the canvas tool bag in his hand. We've already run the basic checks, Brent said. This is more of a courtesy look. Marcus set his bag down beside the velvet rope. Then it won't take long. A few people chuckled, unsure whether he had meant to be funny. Vivienne checked her watch, then glanced toward the auction stage. She was doing 3 things at once, listening to a donor, tracking the photographer, and managing Marcus with the polite patience of someone used to rooms obeying her. The car is scheduled to roll forward in 12 minutes, she said. If you find anything serious, tell me directly. Brent gave a soft laugh. If there was anything serious, we'd know. Marcus didn't answer. He put on the white cotton gloves from his tray, though they were not as white anymore after years of careful use. He ran 2 fingers along the hood seam, then paused at the latch. That was when Vivian turned to the crowd and said, lightly, well, if he fixes my Ferrari in 12 minutes, I suppose I'll have to marry him. The tent laughed. The judge laughed first, then the donors, then the photographer, who lifted his camera for Marcus's reaction. Jalen, standing behind the rope with the cooler at his feet, did not laugh. Marcus kept one hand on the hood latch. For a second, nothing changed on his face. Then his thumb pressed harder against the metal. The small tendon near his wrist stood out. Composure had a cost. It showed up in small places. He lifted the hood. The Ferrari's engine bay gleamed under the lights, all sculpted covers, carbon trim, and polished hardware. Brent stepped closer with a confident tilt to his chin. Beautiful, isn't it? Marcus leaned in. At first, the problem looked like nothing. A red grease pencil mark near the wiring harness, too low, too far forward. A tiny bypass wire tucked where factory hands would never place it. Beside it, a faint brown kiss of heat on the insulation. Marcus reached into his bag and took out the carbon fiber inspection mirror. Brent's smile thinned. Careful around that side. Marcus angled the mirror beneath the cover. Vivienne was still speaking to the donor beside her, but her eyes had shifted back to Marcus. He stopped moving. The jazz music kept playing. A champagne glass clicked somewhere behind him. Marcus looked once at the bypass wire, then at Jalen, then at the nameplate near the engine bay. He removed one glove slowly and folded it into his palm. Brent noticed. "Is there a problem?" Marcus's voice came out low. "Who signed off on this harness?" The laughter around the Ferrari died unevenly, person by person, until even the photographer lowered his camera. Brent Lask's face did not change at first. That was how Marcus knew the man understood the question. "Everything on this car was checked twice," Brent said. "That wasn't my question." Vivienne stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make the conversation feel private, even though half the tent had turned toward them. "Mr. Vale, what exactly are you seeing?" Marcus kept his eyes on the harness. "A bypass." Brent gave a quick laugh. That's dramatic. It's a temporary diagnostic lead. Nothing more. Then it should be labeled. It was handled by professionals." Marcus looked at him. "Then one of them can sign beside it." The photographer shifted to get a better angle. A donor whispered to the county judge. Near the velvet rope, Jalen stood with both hands in the cooler, fingers buried in melting ice, though he had stopped reaching for a bottle. Vivienne noticed the attention gathering. This was the part she feared most in any room, a small problem becoming public before she had enough information to control it. "Can this wait until after the auction?" she asked. Marcus shook his head once. "No." Brent stepped between Marcus and the car, still smiling, but now the smile had edges. "Ms. Cross, with respect, this gentleman runs a two-bay shop behind a tire warehouse. He's not familiar with how rare vehicles are prepared for presentation." There it was, the second cut. The first had been a joke. This one came dressed as expertise. A few people looked at Marcus's boots again. Someone near the back gave a small, embarrassed cough. Jalen pulled his wet hands from the cooler and dried them on his hoodie. Marcus folded the cotton glove once more, slower than he needed to. His voice stayed even. "Heat got into this insulation." Brent pointed toward the engine bay. "Surface discoloration happens during transport." "Not here!" "You're guessing." Marcus reached for the red grease pencil in his tool bag and marked a small circle on the underside of the harness cover. Vivienne's mouth tightened. "Please don't mark the car. It's removable. That isn't the point." "No, ma'am, it isn't." For the first time, she looked angry, not loud. Vivian Cross did not do loud. She simply stood straighter, and everyone around her seemed to remember she owned the night. "I asked for honesty," she said. "I did not ask you to disrupt a charity auction over an unlabeled wire." Marcus's fingers tightened around the grease pencil until a red smudge marked his thumb. Composure had its own language. Jalen saw it. So did Clara, standing 2 steps behind Vivian with her tablet held against her ribs. Clara had stopped typing. Her eyes had fixed on the brown heat mark like she had seen a photograph trying to come alive. Brent turned to the crowd with a patient smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly why high-end vehicles require high-end technicians." That got a few soft laughs. Fatal overreach rarely looked fatal while it was happening. Sometimes it sounded reasonable. Sometimes it wore a tailored jacket and spoke in a calm voice. Brent reached into a folder held by one of his assistants and pulled out a printed inspection sheet. "If Mr. Vale needs reassurance, he can read what qualified hands already approved." He held the paper toward Marcus. At the bottom was a signature. Marcus did not touch it. He only looked at the name. Then the date. Then the sequence number stamped in the corner. His face went quiet, in a way Jalen had seen only once before, on the morning somebody from the old racing team had called about Andre. Vivian followed his gaze. "What is it?" Marcus lifted his eyes to Brent. "This isn't just your mistake." The tent grew still around him. "It's an old one." Marcus set his tool bag on the ground. Slowly, no one spoke. Brent still held the inspection sheet out between them, but his wrist had dropped half an inch. Marcus reached into the side pocket of the bag and took out the carbon fiber inspection mirror again. Then he took out a small flashlight, no bigger than his thumb. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at the car. "Turn the auxiliary power on," he said. Brent laughed once through his nose. "We're not doing a demonstration." Marcus looked at Vivian. "Your car. Your call." Vivian's eyes moved from Marcus to Brent, then to the Ferrari. She had spent her life weighing risk in rooms full of rich men who smiled while hiding numbers. This was different. This was a man with a grease pencil on his thumb, and nothing to gain by making himself smaller. "Do it," she said. Brent's jaw tightened. An assistant reached into the cabin and switched the auxiliary power on. A small relay clicked. Marcus angled the mirror beneath the harness cover. The flashlight beam caught the bypass wire. "Watch the brown spot." The first second showed nothing. The second showed nothing. On the third, a thread of smoke lifted, thin, gray, barely there. Someone near the front whispered, "Oh my God." A woman in a silver dress stepped back first. The county judge leaned forward, squinting like the truth might change if he got closer. The photographer lowered his camera, then raised it again with slower hands. Jalen did not move. Marcus switched the power off. The smoke vanished. For a few beats, the jazz quartet kept playing because they could not see what had happened. Then the trumpet player noticed the faces turned toward the Ferrari, and his last note bent awkwardly before stopping. Marcus pointed at the marked cover. "Heat travels here, then here. If that relay stays live during startup, it doesn't fail all at once. It warms, it softens, it waits." Brent swallowed. "That is speculative." "No." Marcus pulled the inspection sheet from Brent's hand at last and laid it flat on the Ferrari's front panel. He did not slap it down. He placed it carefully, like even bad paper deserved not to scratch good paint. He tapped the sequence number. This pattern was flagged before. Clara stepped forward. Her face had gone pale in a quiet, office-light way. She was not looking at the car anymore. She was looking at the number, I know that case, she said. Vivian turned. What case? Clara's fingers tightened around the tablet. Andre Vale, Desert Crown Test Facility, 3 years ago. Jalen's head snapped toward her. Marcus closed his eyes once. Only once. Vivian's control cracked at the edge, her lips parted, but no polished sentence came out. Brent spoke too quickly. That was unrelated. Marcus opened his eyes. Then why did your shop bury the same warning? The question hung there. It did not need volume. It moved through the tent, one person at a time. The judge looked at Brent. The woman in silver covered her mouth. One donor, slower than the rest, stared at the faint smoke stain as if it had finally become a language he could read. Vivian looked down at the inspection sheet, then at Marcus. For the first time that night, she did not look like a CEO managing a problem. She looked like a daughter remembering a phone call. Marcus did not wait for applause. There was none anyway. The kind of truth he had just put in the open did not make people cheer. It made them check their own hands, their own signatures, their own silence. Brent started speaking again. Ms. Cross, I strongly recommend we move this discussion somewhere private, before anyone misinterprets. Stop, Vivian said. One word. Clean. Brent stopped. Marcus picked up his inspection mirror and slid it back into the side pocket of his bag. Then he capped the red grease pencil, wiped the smudge from his thumb with the edge of the cotton glove, and closed the Ferrari's hood with both hands. He did it gently. That seemed to bother Brent, more than anger would have. Jalen stood behind the rope, still holding the cooler. Melted ice water had darkened the front of his hoodie. He looked at his uncle, like he had just watched a locked door open halfway, only to see another one behind it. Vivian stepped toward Marcus. Mr. Vale. He lifted the tool bag onto his shoulder. Car doesn't move tonight. I understand. No auction drive, no startup demo, no charity lap around the resort. I said I understand. Marcus nodded once. Good. He turned. Vivienne followed him with her eyes, then with her feet. Wait! The crowd shifted, hungry for the next sentence. A donor in a blue jacket pretended to answer a text while keeping his phone angled toward them. The photographer lowered his camera this time and did not raise it again. Vivian's voice softened, but not enough to become private. About the joke earlier. Marcus stopped. He did not turn fully around. Leave it. It was inappropriate. Yes. The answer was so short that Vivian had nowhere to hide inside it. Her face changed by a fraction. She was used to apologies creating room. Marcus's answer closed the room instead. Jalen looked from Vivian to Marcus. Then Clara spoke from behind them, still holding the tablet. Marcus, the Desert Crown file. There may be more in the archive. Marcus's shoulders tightened. Don't! Jalen's eyes narrowed. What file? Marcus looked at Clara. She understood, too late, that she had stepped on something living. I'm sorry, she said. Jalen set the cooler down. No. What file? Marcus turned toward his nephew. The noise of the gala thinned around them. In the distance, the electronic sign outside the resort flashed half a message about a taco special from the restaurant next door, stuck on the word taco in bright yellow letters. Jalen took one step closer. Is this about Dad? Marcus said nothing. That silence answered too much. Jalen's face pulled tight, but he did not cry. At 15, he had learned to make hurt look like attitude before anyone could pity him. You knew, he said. Marcus lowered his voice. Jalen. No. You knew there was more. I knew enough to wait. Wait for what me to stop asking. Marcus's hand closed around the strap of his tool bag. The warped pit pass tag sat in his shirt pocket, hard against his chest. Vivienne looked away. For the first time that night, she gave them privacy by refusing to watch. Jalen shook his head once. You always do this. Then he turned and walked toward the parking lot, leaving the cooler beside the velvet rope. Marcus took one step after him. Stopped. The crowd behind him had finally gone quiet, but the person who mattered most had already heard enough. The employee break room behind the ballroom was too bright. A fluorescent light buzzed above a plastic table. Someone had left a paper plate with half a sandwich beside the microwave. The lettuce gone limp at the edges. The air smelled like burnt coffee, printer toner, and the lemon cleaner hotel staff used on everything after guests went home. Marcus stood near the vending machine, not because he wanted anything, but because standing by a door made leaving easier. Vivienne sat across from him, with both hands around a paper cup she had not touched. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Outside the wall, the gala continued in a wounded version of itself. Softer music, smaller voices, people pretending they had always cared about safety reports. Vivienne finally looked up. I owe you an apology. Marcus said nothing. She swallowed. The joke was careless, public, demeaning. I thought I was easing tension. You were. That made her blink. Marcus looked at the floor. You eased it for them. The cup shifted in Vivienne's hands, bending slightly under her fingers. She nodded once, but the nod did not fix anything. My father died in a development car, she said. Different company, different state. Same kind of language afterward. Minor thermal event, driver error, unforeseen conditions. Marcus glanced at her then. Vivienne's voice stayed controlled, but the words came with less polish now, like she had removed a layer from each one. I built my whole career around never letting anyone surprise me with a report after the damage was already done. Then tonight scared you. Yes. Good. Her eyes lifted sharply. Marcus did not soften it. Fear can keep people alive if they don't dress it up. Vivienne looked down at the cup again. For a second, she seemed ready to defend herself. The room could feel the old habit in her posture. Shoulders back, chin steady, argument already forming. Then she stopped. Her thumb rubbed the paper seam on the cup until it started to fray. I wanted the car to be perfect, she said. For the donors, for the foundation, for the press. I let perfect become louder than safe. Marcus nodded once. That was true. It was also not enough. The problem isn't wanting perfect, he said. It's who gets ignored when perfect starts costing too much. Vivienne took that without answering. The door opened. Clara stepped in, holding a manila folder and her tablet. Her face carried the nervous look of someone who had found what she was looking for, and wished she had not. I pulled the archived Desert Crown material, she said. Marcus straightened. I told you not to. I know. Clara's voice was quiet. But Brent's name is on both chains. Vivienne stood. Both. Clara placed the folder on the table. The current Ferrari inspection and the Andre Vale incident review. Not the final signature. Earlier, technical routing. Marcus did not touch the folder. Vivienne did. She opened it halfway, then stopped at the first page. Her lips parted. No statement came. No command. Only a small intake of breath, uneven enough that Marcus heard it over the fluorescent buzz. Clara looked at him. There's something else. Marcus's hand closed around the vending machine edge. What? Clara turned the page. The flagged warning wasn't removed after the accident. It was reclassified. Vivian stared at the paper. Marcus stared at the door. Because outside that room, somewhere in the parking lot, Jalen still believed silence was the same thing as betrayal. Marcus found Jalen at the shop after midnight. The front bay door was half open. Desert air moved through the space in slow, warm sheets, carrying the faint smell of dust, old oil, and the cardboard box of brake pads someone had delivered to the wrong address 2 days earlier. Jalen sat on the floor beside the Aston Martin, with his back against the lift post. His hoodie was still damp near the stomach from the melted ice. Marcus stood in the doorway for a while, before entering. The vending machine outside the tire warehouse hummed across the lot, bright and useless. It had eaten somebody's coins again. The same angry clank came every few seconds. Jalen did not look up. "You here to tell me I don't understand?" "No." "Then what?" Marcus walked to the workbench. He opened the second drawer and took out the torque wrench with the blue tape around the handle. Then he reached into his shirt pocket and removed the melted pit pass tag. He placed both items on the concrete floor between them. Jalen stared at the tag. For a moment, the boy's face emptied of everything except recognition. "Dad's." Marcus sat down slowly. His knees did not like the concrete anymore, but he stayed there. "Yeah." Jalen picked up the pit pass tag with 2 fingers. The plastic was rough where it had burned. One corner had curled like a fingernail held too close to flame. It smelled faintly of old smoke, though Marcus knew that might have lived more in memory than in the material. The raised letters of Andre's name caught against Jalen's thumb. "You had this the whole time." "Yes." Jalen's voice cracked around the next word. "Why?" Marcus looked at the torque wrench. "Your dad used that wrench on his last inspection." Jalen turned toward it. He missed something. Marcus's answer took longer than it should have. "He was tired. They were behind schedule. Brent's routing team had already cleared the harness path. Andre signed the final check because he trusted the earlier sheet. So it was Brent. It was a chain. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one." Jalen's jaw tightened. Marcus forced himself to stay with the truth this time. "Your father made a mistake. A real one. So did other men who had more power and less excuse. After he died, they let his signature carry more blame than it should have. I thought if I kept that from you, I was protecting the part of him you still loved." Jalen looked down at the tag. "You let me think you were hiding because you didn't care." Marcus nodded. "I did." The shop grew quiet around them. No music, no crowd, no polished car waiting to be saved. Jalen rubbed his thumb over the warped edge again. "If the truth makes him look bad, does that mean I have to love him less?" Marcus closed his hand around the blue-taped wrench, then released it. "No!" That was the only sentence he trusted. Jalen breathed through his mouth once, hard. Then he set the pit pass tag back down, careful as if it could still burn him. Marcus stood, went to the sink, and filled a paper cup with water. He handed it to Jalen. The boy took it without looking up. 2 mornings later, Marcus stood in front of the Ferrari at a private inspection lot east of Palm Springs. No gala lights, no champagne glasses, No photographer crouching near the wheel. Just a flat stretch of asphalt, a chain-link fence, and a county safety inspector who kept losing his pen behind one ear. The desert heat was already rising, carrying the smell of hot rubber and dust across the lot. Beside Marcus, Jalen held the clipboard with both hands. Vivian Cross arrived alone. She wore dark slacks, a plain white shirt, and no jewelry except a narrow watch. Clara came 10 minutes later with the full archive file and a new safety protocol drafted overnight. Brent was not there. His name was, though, on routing sheets, on approval chains, on emails written in careful language by people who understood how to move blame without touching it directly. Marcus had enough to do damage. He could have called reporters. He could have sued the foundation, embarrassed Vivian, and made Brent's career collapse in public. He could have let the world turn Andre's name into a headline again. He did none of that. He handed Vivian a 6-page report with photographs, heat readings, and a repair path written in plain language. "This goes to the safety board," he said. "All of it." Vivian took it. "Yes. And Andre's file gets corrected." Her voice changed there. "It will." Marcus looked at her until she understood that promise would not live in the air. It would need paper. Clara opened a folder. "I prepared the request already." Jalen glanced at Marcus, surprised. Marcus only nodded. A few minutes later, while the inspector checked the Ferrari's battery isolation, Marcus walked to his pickup and poured gas from a red can into the tank. The gauge had been low since the night of the gala. He had ignored it too long. The little receipt printer on the portable fuel pump spat out a strip of paper, with almost no ink on it. Jalen watched. "You always do stuff at the last second." Marcus capped the gas can, more than I should. It was not an apology. It was a start, back near the Ferrari. Vivian stood beside the open hood, not touching anything. When Marcus returned, she looked at him with the careful expression of someone trying not to ask for more than she had earned. "Will you oversee the repair?" Marcus looked at Jalen. The boy shrugged. A small shrug. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But he stayed. Marcus turned back to Vivian. "I'll inspect it after." Her mouth tightened with something close to disappointment, then settled into respect. "Fair. The repaired harness would take weeks. The public correction would take longer. Some people would deny what they had signed. Some would claim they never saw the warning. Andre's name would not come back clean in every mouth." Still, that morning, Jalen took the red grease pencil and wrote the new inspection date on the Ferrari's windshield. The numbers slanted downward. Marcus did not correct them. In the back of his pickup, inside a clear plastic case, the melted pit pass tag rested where sunlight could reach it without hiding it away.